Morning, welcome to this webinar on share plans for early stage companies. I'm Robin Hartley, an associate at RM2, and I'm also the founder of EMI-online, which is a new service being offered by RM2. This presentation will take 20 to 30 minutes, and there's an opportunity for questions at the end. I hope everyone can see the screen. If you can't, or are there any other problems, just use the interface to put your hand up and ask a question. So the agenda for today is that we're going to focus on share plans for early stage companies. And actually the bulk of this is going to be focused on an EMI plan and a particular design of plan that we've come up with focused on early stage companies. Let's begin with talking about what makes a plan suitable for an early stage company in the first place. I think that any plan needs to be simple because an early stage company is going to have limited administrative resources to deal with a complicated plan. Also, by the nature of the employees that early stage companies are taking on, employees are going to find it more difficult to trust a very complicated plan, and also probably they aren't going to be as familiar with complicated equity incentive schemes. It also needs to be flexible. An early stage company by its nature isn't going to be able to shape the market to its own desires as someone like Google or Facebook is going to be able to. They're still developing their business model and they need to respond to changing markets. Also, a plan needs to be good value. That's both in terms of upfront costs and lifetime costs of that plan, and that's got to include taxes and administration. There are a large number of different plans available. This isn't a comprehensive list, but this is some of the most typical plans and why I think some are suitable and some, or most, aren't suitable for early stage companies. If we start on the right hand side with those that are complicated or inflexible, a DSPP or deferred share purchase plan effectively allows you to buy shares now and pay later. So there's a potential for a great tax treatment there, but putting in the buy now, pay later mechanics can make it complicated. A joint share ownership plan can also deliver great tax treatment, and it delivers that by allowing an employee just to buy the growth in value on the share rather than the whole value of the share. It uses a trust structure to deliver that, and setting up that trust and maintaining that trust is extra expense that I find a lot of early companies don't really want to stomach, and it's not necessary. SAYE plans and SIP plans, they're all employee plans. They're quite complicated to understand and administer, and I don't think I've ever set them up for an early stage company. Moving on to ones that are just tax inefficient. A CSOP, or a company share option plan, that does come with government tax relief, but because of the restrictions and some of the rules around it, it's not as tax efficient as an EMI plan. So potentially there is some tax relief there. It's not the worst tax treatment, but if you're an early stage company, you can probably do better. Free shares, it's very simple. It's literally just giving an employee shares and asking the employee to pay the tax on those shares. It's just not tax efficient. You can do better on the tax treatment than that. Also, there's a simple option without trying to comply with any of the rules to get government tax relief. That gives you the worst tax treatment because you end up paying tax at the time when the shares are at the highest value. So that really boils down to two different plans being the most favorable, an EMI plan or growth shares. I'm not going to focus on growth shares today just because it's a backup approach. I think if you can qualify for an EMI plan, then that offers the most flexibility, the most potential to keep it simple, and far and away the best tax treatment. If for some reason your company can't qualify for an EMI plan, then go for growth shares as a backup. So what is an EMI plan? It's a government-backed scheme to give equity to employees with favourable tax treatment. The favourable tax treatment is potentially corporation tax deduction for the company, no employer national insurance contributions, and proceeds in the hands of employees could be tax-free or taxed at 10% when those shares are sold by an employee. So, great tax treatment. The scheme has qualifying conditions for the company and each employee. The fundamental structure of it is that an EMI plan allows you to give options to your employees, and an option is just a right to buy shares in the future at a fixed price. Now I want to talk about a simple EMI plan. A simple EMI plan is something that RM2 and EMI-online have designed with early stage companies in particular focus. And this is a type of plan that should fit as many early stage companies as possible. The deal is as simple as possible for employees. If they stay with the business up to a sale, they'll receive a share of the proceeds from the sale. And that sale must happen within 10 years. Alternatively, you can go for 4-year vesting. These two approaches, in our view, are market standard, and an early stage company should think very carefully before departing from one of these market standard approaches to vesting. In terms of how leavers are treated, the board simply decides how to treat that employee. The employee has to pay all taxes, and we've done a huge amount of work in making sure that the documents are written in plain English. One of the difficulties we have with early stage companies is justifying why a simple plan is the best thing. Lots of founders want to quite rightly understand every potential complexity, every potential wrinkle, and then want to, when they understand all those potential complexities and wrinkles, produce rules that address them. I think it's not necessary. Yes, understand those complexities, but a simple approach is probably the best way of dealing with those complexities. So if we start with performance conditions, yes, you can make the delivery of shares conditional on, say, the individual performance at appraisals, or the performance of a particular department, or even milestones. I find those don't tend to work for early stage companies, just because what the company might be doing in the first year might change hugely in the second year, and however those performance conditions were drafted, they end up looking irrelevant a few years later. An EMI plan and an option by its nature is rewarding growth. So that really is an inbuilt performance condition. You're incentivizing employees by reference to the growth in the company. And I think that's all you need. Also, complicated provisions dealing with termination of employment. My experience is they just don't survive the reality a few years down the line. A lot of employers have very clear ideals of how things should work to begin with. But when it comes to the actual time, they find that they either waive them or relax them or change them. So if those complicated provisions aren't going to be complied with, why set them up in the first place? Be straightforward with your employees and say it's going to be flexible. The third area of potential complexity is giving a separate class of shares for employees. And this is to achieve a few things. Firstly, it might be to deny employees voting rights. It might be to declare dividends separately for employees. At the extreme, it might be to give every single employee their own class of share and be able to declare dividends separately on each class of share. Lots of companies do that. I think it's unnecessary complexity, and I also think it breaks the clear link between company performance and a particular share of that and the employee. If you give yourself a huge amount of flexibility with different classes of shares, how does an employee know that you're going to exercise that discretion always in their favour? It reduces trust, it reduces alignment between the employee and their output. The last thing that comes up as a typical issue to try and address with complicated rules is protecting certain classes of shareholder or employee against dilution. So as an example, let's say you give an employee 2% of the company. If 20% of that company is, 20% of the company is given to new investors, should that employee be diluted? I think the right answer is always yes. Everyone should be diluted by new rounds of fundraising or new rounds of grants to employees. The idea is when new shares are being issued, that either brings in the skills of a particular employee or it brings in more money. And as a result, the size of the pie, the size of the company should grow. So although they're being diluted, they're getting a smaller share of a larger company. And if the decision to issue those shares was sensible, that smaller share should be larger as a proportion of their whole company. So I don't think there are good reasons to address dilution specifically. So we've designed a simple plan with the rules and provisions that we think are the best for an early stage company. And so looking at the original criteria for a plan, that a plan for an early stage company should be simple, and it should be good value, or we've addressed the simplicity, we've addressed the flexibility. On the value front, we also want to drive down the cost, and being simple helps us drive down the cost, but also putting a lot of the service online helps that as well. So if you sign up for a simple plan on EMI-online.co.uk, we can offer from £95 a month a simple EMI plan. We can also offer the administration of that plan, including registering the plan with HMRC and annual filings. It's fast. Should be able to go from registration on the site to documents in front of your employees in the same week. Now I want to go through the process online of creating your plan. The way it works is that there are 3 questionnaires, and the idea is that you get information about your company and your employees, and you fill these questionnaires in yourself. The first questionnaire covers details about your company and the business of that company. The second questionnaire is about the share capital structure of your company. And the third is about employees that you want to motivate. Let's have a look at the first questionnaire. Hopefully these questions are sort of questions that a founder or director can answer off the top of their head, or maybe with a quick check at Companies House. There's company registration number, number of full-time employees, are the gross assets less than 30 million, and so on. On average, we're seeing that people take about 5 minutes to fill out that questionnaire, so hopefully not too hard. The reason behind this isn't a data trawling exercise for our own purposes. This is to make sure that any companies that sign up do meet the qualifying conditions for an EMI plan. And the underlying government policies of these questions are that the very favourable tax relief attaching to EMI plans is reserved only for small and medium-sized companies, that it doesn't provide a subsidy for investment or financial services firms or traditional industries, and some of the rules are to limit the opportunity for abuse. The second questionnaire is about your share capital structure. That means the number of shares that you've already issued, the total number of shares over which options will be granted, and also, are you happy that a simple EMI plan will be simple? And yeah, there are some bits of flexibility and bespoke provisions that you won't be able to do with EMI-online. This also allows us to do a sanity check of what you're planning. The third questionnaire is about your employees. This is again about checking eligibility for an EMI plan, making sure that employees get that favourable tax relief. The underlying government policies here of these questions are to make sure that it is genuine employees who are getting the tax relief, again to limit opportunity for abuse. If you qualify and if you've completed those 3 questionnaires, you can then add individual employees to the plan. The 2 big questions you'll need to think about are how many shares to award and what exercise price to set. I'm going to go through a few rules of thumb that might help you decide how to answer those questions. So on the number of shares to award, I think this 3-step approach gives you a pretty good starting point as to how many shares to award that is pretty consistent with market practice. Doesn't give you a perfect answer. You're going to have to adjust this according to how you feel about the employees, and it might also be a matter of negotiation. So I would start by allocating to each employee's 5% to the CEO or other absolutely fundamentally key employee, 2% to other board members, and then 0.5% to 1.5% to key employees who aren't on the board. Add up those allocations, and if the total comes back to 10%, scale everyone's down equally. Take the end result and multiply each percentage by the total number of shares in issue. That end result should be pretty consistent with market practice. The reason I've gone for 10% as being the total pot is that I think it's pretty standard to get to an exit and to have given away around 20% of the company to employees. So the idea is, if you're an early stage company in your first 1 or 2 years, give away 2%, and holding back another 10% for years 3 to 4, with the idea that you would be aiming to go for an exit in year 5. Then what should the exercise price be? So just to have a quick recap, this is an EMI option plan. An option is a right to buy a share at a fixed price in the future. In practice, if this is an exit-only plan, the purchase price or the exercise price of the share is just going to be deducted from the proceeds of sale of the share. It's quite hard to decide exactly why a particular exercise price should be attached to the shares. But my view is that it's all about what does the employee deserve. If that employee should be benefiting from value right from the beginning of the company when it was worth absolutely nothing, then the exercise price should be 0. That means that they get the full value, the full growth in value of the shares. If you think that they only deserve to benefit from the creation of value at some later point, then make the exercise price whatever the market value of shares is as that later point. And that point in time might be when they joined the company, when they got a significant promotion, or when they started performing particularly well. Another approach is to say that founders have invested a certain amount of time and money, put a value on that time, and then set the exercise price at an amount that rewards the founders for the investment. So as an example, let's say the founders feel that they've invested £250,000 in order to set up the company. That means that if there were, say, 1,000 shares, then I just have to do the maths on this. You would set the exercise price at £250 per share. So that means that the employees are only benefiting in the value created above that initial contribution by founders. So what does a simple EMI plan look like? If you sign up to EMI-online and pay the £95, fill out those questionnaires, we'll give you 3 documents or sets of documents. First off is a board paper setting out the fundamentals of the plan and the resolutions that need to be passed by the board to adopt the plan. Second is a set of plan rules. And a third is an option agreement for each employee. We've designed this to be as fast as possible. So we think the 3 questionnaires can be completed in about 20 minutes. We think that another 20 minutes is probably needed to complete the details for each employee. Once you do that, we take around 2 working days to create documents and upload them to the website. From that point, you've got a 30-day window to get the documents out to employees and to get them signed. Once that's done, an EMI team member will contact you to help register the options with HMRC. So that's it. I hope that's been a useful guide as to, firstly, what kind of plan is appropriate for an early stage company. Also a useful insight as to a simple EMI plan and how that could be good for an early stage company. If you're interested, visit emi-online.co.uk, where there's a little bit more information and you could sign up and create your own simple EMI plan. I'll be online for a few more minutes, so if anyone wants to ask a question, please use the webinar interface to type in the question and I will attempt to answer it. Just for people who've got their hands up, my intention is that you type in the questions rather than taking them verbally, because there are a few of them out there. Okay, the first question is from someone who runs an IFA business as an LLP. Is that a suitable trade, and can an EMI plan be done for an LLP? So I said one of the qualifying conditions is that the trade isn't a financial services company. If it's only providing advice, then there's a good chance that it doesn't fall within what we think the meaning of financial services is there. And we think the definition of financial services is all about investing in assets. What we normally do on financial services companies is we summarize the nature of the business. We write to HMRC to confirm that they qualify, because on the plain language of the EMI legislation, it's probably not clear if you're an IFA whether you qualify. You also mentioned that it's an LLP. You aren't going to be able to qualify for an EMI plan if you're an LLP, but there are other things that can be done to get a similar result. So thank you for that question. Oh, okay. The next question is whether we can agree market value with HMRC. Absolutely. It isn't included in the £95 per month charge for EMI-online, just because some valuations can be simple, some can be complicated, but we can definitely do a valuation and agree with the HMRC for a sensible price. Okay, doesn't look like we've got any more questions, so I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you very much for your time.